Hello my friends and welcome back to another video. Today is my December wrap up. December was a very weird reading month for me. I wanted to read a lot of Christmas horror, and the Christmas horror I read I wasn't the biggest fan of. I felt like I ran into a lot of duds in December, especially the second half of December, and it was really disheartening and I was getting really frustrated with the books I was reading. But aside from that, I read a lot of manga in December. I think I was just kind of bored and I didn't really feel like picking up any of my books, so I just was reading a lot of manga. So this is kind of the wrap up with a lot of duds and then a lot of good manga that I liked. So very strange combination, I know, but of course we are going to start with the bottom of the barrel and work our way up to the 5 stars, the best reads I had for the month of December, to end on a more positive note. I'm going to try to go as fast as possible. I know I say that every time, but I have a lot of things to talk about and we know I can talk for a very, very long time. So I am going to try to make this snappy. We'll see, but I'm gonna try. So the first book up is actually the only DNF I had for the month of December, and that is Return of the Living Elves by Brian Asman. This is like a zombie Christmas horror book, and it's about this warehouse supply manager who's trying to help his new employee find a gift for his girlfriend for Christmas, and they accidentally set loose these genetic mutated elf zombies, I guess is what you would call them. I DNF'd this about 40% into the book. Honestly, I'm not the biggest zombie fan. I knew that going into this. So I believe this book is making fun of The Return of the Living Dead. That is a horror movie that has to do with zombies. I've never seen it. Again, don't like zombie movies, don't like zombie books. I'm not a big fan of zombies. The reason I DNF this is the writing is extremely confusing to follow. I found it very, very choppy. I had no idea what was going on the whole time I was reading it. I feel like the plot is only going to be funny or interesting if you get the references that the story's making. Again, haven't seen the movie that it was playing off of, so I didn't get it. The jokes weren't funny. The ideas weren't really hitting where they were supposed to be hitting. I didn't get it. I just don't think it was for me. I was obviously not the target audience for this book, which is why I decided to DNF it. I didn't want to give it a negative review because I'm just not the person that should have picked up this book, so that is why I decided to DNF. Next up is the 2-star category, and first up we have Santa Took Them by William Malmberg. So I read this in a vlog. I read a lot of these in vlogs actually, so I'll have the vlogs linked down below, but this is a slasher Christmas horror. 10 years ago, this girl was the only member of her family to survive this deadly massacre. All her family members were decapitated and she was the only one found alive, and then 10 years later she is released from the psychiatric hospital that she was staying in. She gets released to her uncle and his girlfriend, and then they are found murdered the same way her family was, and a giant manhunt gets started for her because they believe she is the culprit. This is a bad B movie. Like, this book is a B movie, but just really, really bad in my opinion. The first half was okay. You can definitely see where the author was taking inspiration from Halloween. This also kind of feels like Silent Night, Deadly Night to me at a lot of times, which is fine. I really love Halloween. I really liked Silent Night, Deadly Night, so you think I would like this. There's some really weird sex scenes in here, like very bizarre. I was reading them out loud to Justin because I literally could not believe someone had written the sex scenes like this and thought it sounded good, and I was laughing because it was just so bad. It was just very, very weird. I felt like the twist wasn't really good. I feel like the ending was kind of lame. I just felt like I was reading a really bad B movie, and it wasn't good. It wasn't what I wanted it to be. It was just not, it was not a fun time for me, and I was very glad when it was over. The second half of the book really shows the flaws with the writing and like the plot, and so by the end of the book I was just really done with it. It was not very good. Next up in the 2-star category, we have Horror Stories to Ruin Christmas. So this is a short story collection where all the stories are supposed to come together and make a bigger story, right? They're all supposed to kind of connect. There are the same characters being used in every story, but every story is written by a different author. Honestly, I think the idea was really great in theory, but the execution was just not very good in my opinion. It's very hard when you have a lot of authors contributing to a short story collection, and the writing styles are just very, very different. And so to try to have them all connect and make a bigger picture and a bigger story, I just don't think really worked, because they didn't feel like they flowed very well. They were very, very different kinds of stories, even though they were taking place in the same town, the same characters were popping up, but it didn't really work. I think the other problem is some of the stories would try to have this big twist occur, like it was supposed to make something happen, so later on things would connect, or earlier on things would connect, but I just don't think it works for a short story collection like this. I just think that some of the ideas and some of the plot got lost because the writing wasn't the same or similar for each story. I think it got a little confusing. Because it didn't feel the same, it felt like they weren't part of the same story. My other biggest complaint is half of these stories had nothing to do with Christmas. Christmas was just kind of happening while the stories were being told, but most of the stories didn't really have anything to do with Christmas, so I feel like the title's very misleading because they really don't have anything to do with Christmas. So this collection was not for me. I just don't think it worked very well. Last in the 2-star category is The Visitor by Sergio Gomez. I really wanted to like this novella, but it really fell flat for me. This is about a group of people who get stranded at a diner because of this big snowstorm on Christmas, and they end up encountering an alien. My biggest issue with this story is that it is extremely short, and so it's really hard for any buildup or anticipation to occur because it's only around 80-90 pages. So things start happening, but it almost feels like nothing's really happening as well, which really sucked. My other biggest thing is this is an alien horror story, and I'm very picky with alien horror stories. I'm really, really picky, but this just did not feel like an alien horror story at all. I felt like the alien wasn't very alien, I guess, which was very disappointing, and I was really sad about it because, again, I really do like Sergio Gomez's writing, and I did enjoy Camp Slaughter a lot, but I just feel like this one didn't really do what I wanted it to do. Next, we're moving up to the 2.5-star category, and first up we have The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead. So I actually checked this out from the library because I had a feeling I wasn't going to like this one, and I didn't like In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by this author. After reading this one, I do feel like I'm probably going to stay away from this author because I did not enjoy this one either. This is a thriller about a cult, and the main character is trying to take down this cult and kind of avenge the deaths of her friends. And now, I know a lot of people like this book, and I understand why they do, but for me, I just felt like this thriller was very dramatic, like very over the top, but not in a good way, because I know thrillers can be over the top. I know thrillers are supposed to be dramatic. That's kind of in the thriller formula. One of my biggest issues with this book is it just doesn't feel like a thriller. And I felt that way about In My Dreams I Hold a Knife as well. So I think this is just the author's writing. I just don't really think it grabs me. It's just, there's nothing enticing about it. There's nothing that's pulling me into reading. I just kind of feel like the writing is very boring and kind of flat, at least for me. Again, I already said that I felt like it was over the top and dramatic. I do realize that the author was trying to talk about a cult that is a very real cult in real life. So I do understand the points trying to be made, but I don't know, there's just something that didn't work for me. Also, the twist, I guessed it really early on. I thought that was pretty obvious. So I don't know, it didn't really grab me. I know a lot of people said that it was a really powerful read for them, and I wish I had gotten that experience, but for me, it just didn't really do much. So I definitely think this is just an author thing for me. I don't believe that Ashley Winstead's writing is for me as a reader, so this will probably be the last book that I do read by Ashley Winstead. Next and last in the 2.5 star category is Little Eve by Catriona Ward. I received an e-arc of this through NetGalley. I read it really late because I was really behind on my NetGalley arcs, but I finally got a chance to read this one, and I don't know what happened because I loved The Last House on Needless Street, but I did not love Sundial, and I did not love this one. This one is, again, it's about a cult. Funny that we had two cult books in the 2.5 star category. But this one's about a cult, and it's kind of like a historical fiction story, and it's just really boring. Like, it was too long. It just really nothing happens the whole time. And I just was like, okay, what's the point? When are we getting to it? And I also felt like the twist in this one was extremely obvious. I knew from the very first chapter what had happened. Like, after I started reading the first chapter, I was like, this makes complete sense. So the twist wasn't really twisty. I don't know. I found the writing to be very hard to be engaged with because it kind of feels confusing. I don't know if it is some of the vocabulary that the author used or some of like the words just didn't really connect with my brain, but I think just the way it's written was kind of hard for me to follow and get connected to, so I just really didn't care. And again, it feels like nothing happens. It's very repetitive. It's very obvious, I think, from the beginning what's going on, and I don't know, it just really didn't suck me in, and it just, I don't know, I was really bored while reading it. I didn't care the ending. I was just like, okay, yeah, alright. So I don't know, I was really sad about this one because I really wanted to like it a lot, but it just really didn't work for me. Moving on up to the 3-star category. First up, we have Misery by Stephen King. I didn't hate this, but I think it is so boring. I know that's gonna make so many people mad. I made everyone mad when I said Pet Sematary was boring. I'm sorry. This was also very boring. I feel like it's too long. And this isn't even one of Stephen King's longer books, okay? This is one of his shorter books. But again, I think his ideas are good. I just think the execution is so poor sometimes. I much prefer the movie to this book. If I wanted to read Misery, I would just watch it because honestly, I didn't get any of the same feelings that I do from watching Misery while reading it. It was so boring. I'm gonna be honest, I skipped a lot because Paul is really annoying. I mean, he is a really annoying main character, and I just could not listen to him talk all that time. I was like, dude, I'm done. I don't care about you. Some of the scenes with Paul and Annie were really interesting and I was like excited by them, but then they were over so quickly and it just went back to the same repetitive droning on, and I just wasn't really interested in this story. This is the last Stephen King I own physically that I needed to read, so I will definitely not be buying another Stephen King book. I do not need them on my TBR. I do not enjoy them. I'm honestly surprised I gave this 3 stars. I was gonna give it 2.5, but I decided it wasn't as bad as Pet Sematary, so I bumped it up to 3. But it just, look, I'm not a Stephen King person. I'm sorry, but this was a boring book and it wasn't interesting to me at all. The last book in the 3-star category is Breathless by Amy McCulloch. I'm sad that this one is a 3-star read, but you know, I love my snowy, isolated winter thrillers, and this one just didn't really get me like some of the others have. This is about a journalist who is mountain climbing because she wants this story with this really famous mountain climber, and he wants her to climb the mountain with him and his team before he sits down and does the interview with her. And when they get started climbing, people start dying, okay? Which is it's a very typical thriller plot, especially for a snowy, isolated thriller. My biggest issue with this one is it's just kind of boring. Like, I didn't love the main character. I thought she was really irritating. Some of the things that she did were really frustrating to me. I was kind of shaking my head and being like, girl, stop. Just don't do that. You're being dumb. Like, take a deep breath and give it a second. Relax. Because I was like, you're gonna give yourself away and you're gonna get in trouble. And I'm kind of mad that she didn't figure out who was doing it all, because I figured out what was happening very early on. The twist was really easy for me to guess, and again, it just wasn't satisfying because I already guessed it. I had an annoying main character, a plot twist I already guessed, and I was like, just come on. Let's speed it up a bit. Let's get this going, okay? Let's end this. And so for me, this just wasn't my kind of thriller. I much prefer like Shiver by Ali Reynolds or something along those lines, because for me the mountain climbing and it just didn't work. I was pretty bored. So this was not a thriller that I would reach for, and I'm sad about that. Next up is the 3.5-star category, and the only book we have in this one is Snow by Ronald Malfi. I wish I had liked this one more, and I really tried to like this one, but it's a very strange book. The premise is about Todd. He is trying to go home to see his son for Christmas, but on Christmas Eve there is a huge storm and his flight gets canceled. So him and a few other passengers decide that they are going to rent a car with like 4-wheel drive, like a Jeep, and they're going to drive and get there because they're all trying to get somewhere for Christmas. On the way, they encounter this stranger who says that he's looking for his daughter who's missing, and they end up going to this town that is completely deserted, and things get pretty bad after that. This is not what I expected it to be. This was a very weird story. I had no clue what this book was actually about, so when I started finding out what was really going on, I was surprised, but this is just not my kind of horror story. The best way I can explain it without giving anything away is that it reminds me of the movies The Mist and Nope. If you mix those two movies together, you'd get something like this. It wasn't bad, it was just weird. It was just a weird story. It's not my favorite Ronald Malfi, definitely not. I think the concept is very interesting. The ending was weird. I kind of expected it, kind of didn't. I don't know. It was a weird book. I really can't give you anything else besides it was weird because I don't want to give anything away. Moving on up to the 4-star category, first up we have volumes 1 through 4 of Rosenblood. This is a reverse harem vampire manga. Basically, this is about a young woman who is riding in a carriage and they get into an accident, and she wakes up in this mansion surrounded by these 4 men, and these 4 men are vampires. I'll be honest, this is not a good manga series. Like, I don't think it's actually really like profound, good quality. I'm really just reading it because it's kind of like steamy and silly, and I like vampires, so I don't know. It was just funny to me. It's exactly what it sounds like it is, okay? It sounds dumb, and it is, but in a good way. I do think some of the translation is a little bit iffy. I think some of the plot gets lost. Like, I was a little bit confused at times because I feel like some things weren't explained to the best ability. I think it was just a translation thing. But again, not really reading for the plot. I still think it's a lot of fun and I am enjoying the series. I will continue reading it and, you know, it's just a good time. Okay, the next volume of manga is Happy Sugar Life Volume 10. This is by Tomiyaki Kagisora. This is the final volume in Happy Sugar Life, and I hadn't read the final volume for like a year. It took me forever to finish this series. But this series is about an older girl grooming a younger girl. It's a very dark story. It's very messed up. I didn't really know what to expect from the final volume because, again, I didn't really know what kind of ending we were gonna get. I didn't know where the story was gonna go after the last few volumes because it kind of got to a point where there was only going to be a few ways for this to end. And I have to say that I'm actually, I don't know, I'm kind of satisfied with this ending. It's not a happy ending. It's kind of sad. It's a little bit bittersweet, but it also just makes a lot of sense for the story. Again, the story is about grooming. It's a very dark story. So I feel like it makes sense that this story doesn't have the most happiest sunshiny ending. I did like it. I thought it was a pretty good ending. Overall, this series is a 4-star series, so I did enjoy this one a lot. It's a dark one. The next book is Invitation to Death by Brian Smith. This was a lot of fun. This was kind of a story just to not take so seriously, and it was just pure enjoyment, pure silly, just a good time. Basically, this is like a horror version of Clue. These group of people get invitations to attend this Christmas event at this manor, and if they attend, they get the chance to win $1 million. And when these people start showing up, they realize that they have things in common with each other and that they know each other. Of course, there is a sinister motive for having them all attend this event, and it's just like kind of a bloody Clue horror story. I will say that I think a lot of people will be mad once they get to the end and they reach the conclusion, because if you're looking for a story that is going to have a really good explanation for why everything is occurring, you're not gonna get that with this story. It really doesn't have a big explanation. It doesn't have some profound reasoning for all of this happening. So that was a little bit disappointing because I did want some kind of I wanted an explanation, and I didn't really get that. But the story was really fun. There was some really good kills. I liked the idea of it. It's just like Clue, and I love Clue, so I thought it was a lot of fun. I think a lot of people would enjoy this one. It's very quick and easy to read, so I had fun with it. Next up, we have Bone White by Ronald Malfi. This is another Ronald Malfi in my December wrap-up. I know, 2 books by him. This one I actually really enjoyed. I was very surprised. I did not think I was going to like this one as much as I did. This book is about Paul. His twin brother Danny went missing a year ago, and one day he is watching the news, and in Alaska, this mass murderer is showing police where his victims were located, and it's the same area where his brother went missing. So Paul ends up going to this part of Alaska to try and find out if his brother is one of the victims or what really happened to his brother. This is a very interesting story. It is a folk horror, which we all know is very hit or miss for me. A lot of times it does not work, but I felt like this was done in a way that was easy to understand, and I really did like the direction this story took. I think if you like small towns with secrets, missing people, murder cases, that kind of thing, I think you would enjoy this one a lot. It is slow. It's kind of a long book. It takes a bit to start going. It's a little bit draggy in the beginning before things start going, and I do feel like a lot is repetitive because it's just Paul looking for Danny a lot of the book. But I do think that the direction this book takes is very, very interesting. It's also just a really good grief horror story, and I really liked the ending, honestly. I really did like how it all came together and what happened in the end. I don't know, I just really liked this one. This was a good Ronald Malfi book. I think this is definitely my second favorite. Besides Come With Me. Come With Me is obviously still #1, but this is definitely second place. I really enjoyed this one. Next up is This Is Where We Talk Things Out by Caitlin Marceau. This is another horror novella. I believe it's about 90 pages long. This is about a mother and daughter who have a very estranged relationship, and they decide to go away for the weekend and hash things out, try to make a better relationship for themselves so when they leave, it doesn't go back to the place that it was before. When they get there, there is a huge storm and they end up being trapped, but there is other things that they need to worry about. A lot of people have been comparing this to Misery by Stephen King. I do agree. It is very dark, but very predictable. I do think the predictability doesn't hinder the story. I think it's just kind of the territory with this story. You know where it's going. You know what's going to happen. It's one of those stories where when you're reading, you know the outcome, but you keep reading to hope maybe that the ending won't be what you think it's going to be. I do think that the ending, I would have liked something else from the ending. It is like a punchy ending, but me personally, I just would have liked to see a different ending. But overall, I do think this is a very good, dark, fun. I would not say that it is a lighthearted horror novella. It is very dark, and I do think that you should look up content warnings, trigger warnings, because I think if you have trauma surrounding a family member or a parent, you will be able to relate to the main character a lot, and it could be triggering to hear some of the things that the daughter has endured at the hand of her mother. But overall, I thought it was fun, it was enjoyable, and I did really like it, and I can see why everyone has been raving about it. Then we have Dead Voices by Catherine Arden. This is the second book in the little quartet that this author writes. The first book is Small Spaces. This one is centered around winter. Basically, Ollie's dad gets tickets to this ski resort, and he ends up taking Ollie, Coco, Brian, and Coco's mom with him. And when they get there, there are some sinister things lurking about. I really liked this one. I thought it was a lot of fun. I liked the snowy, isolated setting. I think my biggest problem with this is Small Spaces was so good in my opinion, and it really did something different and unique. And Dead Voices felt too familiar to other things for me. It felt a lot like Coraline. When I was reading it, it really reminded me of Coraline. The twist wasn't as twisty. It didn't really do anything unique, whereas Small Spaces did, in my opinion. I think Small Spaces could stand on its own and it would be just fine, where I think Dead Voices doesn't feel like its own story. It definitely feels like a sequel. And I liked it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I'm going to continue the series, but for me, it's not as good as Small Spaces. Still fun, still cute. I like the direction that this series is heading in, but I still think Small Spaces is much better. The next one is Kiss Her Once for Me by Alison Cochran. This is a Christmas rom-com, and this is basically about the main character who a year ago on Christmas Eve had this really cute run-in with another woman, and they had a really nice time, but things didn't end well, and now in the present day her life is in a completely different direction than it was a year ago. The landlord for the coffee shop she works at ends up kind of proposing this idea that they fake get married and he'd end up helping her out, she'd help him out, and it'd be a great idea. And when she goes home with him for Christmas, she realizes his sister is the woman she met a year ago. I actually felt very attacked while reading this book because they talk about how people from Ohio move to Oregon, and I lived in Ohio before I lived in Oregon, and I live close to Portland. So I felt very weird while reading this because I was like, okay, I really relate to the Ohio stuff, but I also really relate to the Oregon stuff. So it felt very strange to completely understand what the author was talking about with two different states. But this was really cute. It was really sweet. It was a fun holiday rom-com. I really liked the two characters. I really liked the way it went. I do think that it has one of the tropes I don't like, which is miscommunication. I think miscommunication tropes are just really infuriating to me in rom-coms, and most of the time they always have them because it helps propel to the ending and yeah. But I don't know. For me, it's just a little bit annoying because I'm like, this could have been resolved very easily, but you didn't, and now look at what happened. So I did really enjoy this one. It's not my favorite rom-com I've ever read, but I did think it was really fun. And again, I could relate to the Ohio moving to Oregon story thing. It's very much something I relate to because I've done it. Last in the 4-star category is Orochi Volume 2. I read Volume 1 last year and I did like it. I gave it a 3.5 because I felt like it wasn't really what I wanted, and I much prefer Volume 2. There's 3 stories in here, and I feel like it's just a very interesting type of horror. They're very quiet, they're very light on, you know, gore and blood and like super in-your-face horror. This is very much more like a gothic, soft, quiet horror, but I did feel like these stories were much more fun and I enjoyed them much more than Volume 1's. So I am happy that I decided to pick up Volume 2 because I was a little bit hesitant, again, because I didn't love Volume 1, but I am very interested to see what happens in Volume 3, and I'm gonna probably pick it up because I do enjoy this type of horror. I do think a lot of people that haven't tried horror manga would enjoy this, or people that don't necessarily like dark or gruesome stuff would enjoy this one because there's a little bit of darkness. I think it's more easily palatable. Next up is the 4.5-star category, and we only have one in here, and that is Killing Stalking Volume 1 by Kugi. This is a lot. This is a lot. I knew what I was getting into. I did know, but holy guacamole, I did not expect it to be as intense as it was when I first started reading it. So this story follows Yunbum, and he's obsessed with this man called Sang-woo, and his obsession leads him to breaking into Sang-woo's house. But when he does, he realizes that he doesn't know everything about him, and he's got some secrets. This is very, very, very dark. It's very explicit. This is not a romance. This is not fluffy. This is not light. This is not cute. I've seen a lot of people say that it's pretty repetitive, and I will say it is very repetitive in the middle. To me, the repetition wasn't too annoying though. It makes sense for what's happening in the story. And then the ending was, you know, I don't have a lot to say about the ending. I'm gonna be picking up Volume 2, obviously, because I'm very much invested in this story and what's happening with Yunbum and Sang-woo, but please be careful if you pick this up. It's very, very explicit, very dark. It's a lot. It's just a lot, okay? So be wary and mindful if you do decide to read this, but it is very good, and I am interested in it. As of right now, my tentative rating is a 4.5. This is just my tentative rating of a 4.5. It could change as the series goes on, but we'll see. And lastly, on to our 5-star category, we have 2 manga series in here. Well, one's a series, one is just volumes part of a series, and that is Blood on the Tracks Volume 9, 10, and 11. I finally caught up on Blood on the Tracks. This is by Shuzo Oshimi. It is a psychological horror about a mother and son who have a very dark relationship. I just got volume 12 in the mail. This series is a 5-star read so far. I don't think I will give it anything less. So every volume is technically a 5-star read, even though, again, I rate my manga based off of the series, not individually. But so far, Blood on the Tracks is a 5-star series. You know, the series took a turn. It took a turn. I did not expect it. I'm a little upset, a little distraught, a little worried. But I do know after volume 12, we are probably going to have some things happen. I'm a little worried. Yeah, this took a turn. I'm distraught about it. I don't want to talk about it, but it's great. Perfect. I love the series. Shuzo Oshimi can't do wrong in my opinion. I think this is excellent and I highly recommend check content warnings because it is a lot. Next and last for the wrap up and in the 5-star category is Orange, the Complete Collection Volumes 1 and 2 by Ichigo Takano. So this had been sitting on my shelves for a really long time, but then I saw Gabby from Gabby Reads talking about it and she said that it was really good. So I decided to bump it up onto my TBR because it had been sitting on my shelves long enough and I decided to give it a read. This is about the main character who is starting 11th grade and on the day of her starting 11th grade, she receives a letter in the mail from her future self. And her future self is talking about how they are about to get a new transfer student into their class and she needs to watch over him and help change his future because his future is not a good one. This story really reminded me of Erased by Kei Sanbei. I literally just talked about how Erased was in my favorite books of 2022. I love that series with everything in my being and this really does remind me of Erased and I think that's why I really enjoyed it. It's a very emotional story. It's really sad, really hopeful. It's based in friendship and love and helping each other and just changing the outcome of things that you can change. It's very sad. I cried a lot while reading this because I'm a big baby. It made me super emotional. I'm just one of those people, okay? I cry about everything. I can't help it. But this was just really beautiful, really sweet. The characters were so cute and I was just rooting for them and look. It's a beautiful story, okay? I loved it. If you've read this, please read Erased. If you've read Erased, please read this because they are very similar and I think you'll enjoy them both. So I highly recommend this. This was great. Thank you, Gabby, for pushing me to read this because I would have kept pushing it off. I just would have left it unread and I'm glad I didn't because it was so good. There you have it, my friends. That is my December wrap up. That was so long and annoying and I'm so sorry if you are bored of listening to me rant and rave about these books. I tried to go as fast as possible. If you want to let me know what your favorite and least favorite read of December was, you can go do so in the comments down below. I would love to hear from you. If you've read any of these, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I'd love to discuss. If you enjoyed my wrap-up, please give me a thumbs up. It lets me know that you enjoy my wrap-ups. That way I can keep providing you with wrap-ups in the future. If you haven't subscribed, feel free to do so. We can become friends, talk about books, horrifying books, thrilling books, romance books, manga, all that good fun stuff. And with that being said, I hope you are having a great day, night, morning, afternoon, wherever you are, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.